Okay, this is part 3 of session 4 of the Gospel of the Kingdom of God. And in this segment, we're going to look at the second part of the Sermon on the Mount, where we saw the first part was the commandments. The second part is how to fulfill the commandments, or what the old covenant was calling rulings. And we saw that there was a little bit of an introduction before this. And then after this section, there's going to be a section of blessings and warnings. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So how to fulfill the commandments. So in Matthew 5:21 through 7, verse 12, Jesus teaches us how to fulfill the commandments by doing them from the heart rather than by outward appearances. And he's going to begin with examples from the Old Covenant commands. And that's in chapter 5, verses 21 through 48. Then he's going to show how to live for God and not for yourself in your spiritual and secular life. And this comes from chapter 6, verse 1 through verse 34. So it's the entirety of that chapter. And then finally, he's going to teach on how to judge and do it right? How to do it God's way. And that's chapter 7, verses 1 through 11. And then finally, he's going to give a summary statement. And that is 7, verse 12. This is where he's going to say, all the law and the prophets is summed up in, love your neighbor as yourself. So we see this is the structure of this section. We've got examples. He's going to take examples from the Old Covenant, and he's going to show how that's actually fulfilled from the heart rather than just appearances. And we'll dig into that deeply in a future session. But just as an example, you can see, he's one of the examples is adultery. Thou shalt not commit adultery. But I tell you, if you've looked on a woman with lust in your heart, then you've committed adultery already, right? So you can see what he's doing is he's showing it's not just the outward act of not committing adultery. That's not how you fulfill the commandment from the heart. How you fulfill the commandment from the heart is by not having lust in your heart to begin with. You'll never commit the act of adultery if you don't have lust in your heart, right? If you're not looking at another person inappropriately with lust, then it's not in your heart. You just don't have it at all, right? That's how you fulfill the law from your heart. So we'll look at all those examples. That second section, he's going through things like prayer and fasting, and he's talking about money and the pursuit of things that you need in life to live life and all that kind of stuff. And how do you deal with all of these things, both your spiritual activities like prayer and your secular activities like, your job and money and stuff like that? And how do you deal with all that in a way that's actually living for God from the heart, where you're fulfilling those commands from the heart and not just serving yourself? And then that last section, judging righteously, it's the famous, you're, judge not let you be judged. And, why are you worrying about the speck in your brother's eye while you get a log in your own eye, and all that good stuff. And it's about judgment. And he talks about pearls before swine, which is, again, being careful to carefully judge, your situation. And then he gets in the last section where you're asking for judgment. And so we'll get into detail on that. And then it's so cool. He's just give this simple statement, so just make it easy, treat other people as you would want them to treat you. And you've pretty much captured it, right? If you're doing that from the heart, you've pretty much captured, this whole thing. Then the last part is blessings and warnings. And the first part of that is the whole thing is chapter 7, verses 13 through 27. And so this is a section of blessing and warnings. The first is chapter 7, verses 13 through 14, where he's basically going to say, this is not easy. It's not an easy way. It's not the normal way that people go, that kind of thing. He's going to say in verses 15 through 20, you need to watch out for people who will lead you astray from doing what I told you have to do, what your requirements are of the covenant. And then in verses 21 through 27, he's going to illustrate that you can't just listen. You can't just, it's like you can't just go to church and sit in the pew and nod your head, right? You actually have to live this stuff out. You actually have to do these things, or it doesn't do you any good, right? You are not righteous in the covenant otherwise. All right, so let's do a quick review and we'll wrap up part 3. God had said that under the new covenant, he would put his laws in our hearts. And Jesus teaches us how to fulfill those commandments from the heart in these sections. And then Jesus warns us that the requirements of the new covenant are not easy. They're not the normal way people do things. He warned us about false teachers who will lead us astray. And he warned us that we actually have to do these things. We have to do them from the heart. We can't just give lip service to them. And we've probably all been guilty of that. We probably know many people who do that. It's what the Bible likes to call a hypocrite, right? You're saying the thing, but you don't live up to it, right? You don't actually do it. And that's not good enough, Jesus tells us. All right, for next time, we're going to take a deep dive into the commandment section of the Sermon on the Mount. That first part where you've got the Beatitudes, and then you've got the salt and light and all that kind of good stuff. We'll go through all of that in detail, looking at each one and gaining an understanding of what are these things and what do they mean. Until next time.